Every year, Japan commemorates the poignant anniversary of the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki within the space of 3 days. Every year, the Hibakushas attend the anniversary. Hibakusha is the Japanese word for survivor of the bombings. While most of them would attend the ceremony either in Hiroshima or Nagasaki, where they had been bombed, the star of this video would have attended both the ceremonies. To understand the story, let's go back in time. Exactly at 8:15 in the pleasant morning of 6th August 1945, an American Boeing B-29 bomber, Enola Gay, flew across the sky of Hiroshima. The Japanese thought the plane was just passing by. Well, it turned out the plane was there for some other business. The jet was there ready to drop nearly 60 kilos of uranium-235, which would be the first atomic bomb detonation in history. Two parachutes were dropped from the jet. A bright light radiated from the parachute mid-air, followed by a mushroom-shaped cloud and a huge explosion. The weapon was dropped close to the center of Hiroshima, obliterating nearly everything, decimating the city into rubble. An entire city obliterated within seconds. Nearly 70,000 people lost their lives right away. The toll would rise to about 140,000 within the next 5 years, who would later die of diseases relating to radiation poisoning. By pure stroke of luck, Mr. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived. He had just stepped off the tram as the bomb exploded. He was nearly 3 kilometers away from ground zero. At such a close range, the chances of survival was thin. Almost all other people had died. Later in an interview, Yamaguchi recalled having seen two small parachutes before there was a great flash in the sky and I was blown over. He passed out right away. When he woke up, his eardrums were blown, skin burned, and the left side of his head injured. He woke up to be stunned with what he witnessed. The whole city had been devoured in darkness. He encountered piles of bodies everywhere. Bodies had their faces blown, their skin had peeled, and their flesh had been wet and mushy. He would later describe that he had to cross a river full of dead bodies floating like a piece of wood. This is not the end of the story, not at least for Mr. Yamaguchi, who was about to face both of the most devastating bomb attacks ever. Stunned by the incident, anyone would seek the safety of home if you weren't from Hiroshima. So did Mr. Yamaguchi. The next day, he got into the train for his hometown Nagasaki, 420 kilometers away from Hiroshima, where his 6-month-old son and wife were waiting. He was an engineer in Mitsubishi Heavy Industries and had been sent to Hiroshima temporarily for a month. After the bombing in Hiroshima, he returned to his home the next day. Right after he returned to Nagasaki, covered in bruises and injuries, he reported for work the day after. On 9th of August 1945, at his work, he tried to explain to his supervisor on what had happened in Hiroshima, how a single bomb demolished the entire city of Hiroshima. His boss and colleagues completely disregarded him and even questioned his sanity, since nobody had seen such a powerful bomb and news didn't spread as fast back then. Also, the telephone communications were almost completely destroyed. They mocked him and asked to calculate how much power a single bomb would need to have that kind of an impact. Before he could explain, they would get to see the bomb on their own. At 10:58 am local time, another nuclear weapon was dropped off on the sky of Nagasaki by another B-29 jet named Boxcar, visually dropping a 4,400 kilogram plutonium device codenamed Fat Man. It exploded 43 seconds later with a blast yield equivalent to 21 kilotons of TNT at an altitude of 1,650 feet. The bomb was let go about 1.5 miles northeast of the intended aiming point. It was as if the nuclear bombs and Americans were following Mr. Yamaguchi. The blast of flame and radiation incarcerated a reported 60,000 people right away. The figure widely varies with sources ranging from 22,000 to 80,000 immediate casualties. Various reports also claim about another 80,000 would have lost their lives due to radiation poisoning in the later years. Although there were a handful of people who survived or may have survived both the nuclear bombs, Mr. Yamaguchi was the only person recognized by the Japanese government. "I never thought Japan would start a war," said Mr. Yamaguchi in an interview with ABC News. "It seemed so sudden. I was amazed," added Mr. Yamaguchi. Fortunately for Mr. Yamaguchi, he and his family survived the incident and went on to live a happy life in the suburbs of Nagasaki. Satisfied that he and his family had survived the dreadful events and all of them had a healthy life, he didn't talk much about the incidents for a long time. However, his thoughts on nuclear weapons changed later during the Cold War when the world was on the brink of another war. Having seen and suffered the nuclear war had propelled him to become an active proponent of the nuclear disarmament. In his 80s, he wrote a book unfolding his dreadful experiences of the nuclear incidents. He thought the new generation were complacent about the impact and destruction caused by the nuclear weapons. He spent the last 2 decades of his life as an activist for nuclear disarmament and taught the consequences of nuclear war. The reason that I hate the atomic bomb is because of what it does to the dignity of human beings, a statement from one of his last interviews. At the age of 93, he died on 2nd Jan 2010 after fighting stomach cancer for over a year. Nuclear war has always been a hot topic after the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Since then, more and more countries have harnessed the technology. Nations such as Iran and North Korea are often on the headlines for developing nuclear weapons. But the truth is, no nation should be trusted enough to hold the key to weaponries which may wipe us out from the planet. War is never the solution to a conflict. With a bit of luck, we evaded the possibility of a World War III during the Cold War. We were on the brink of the Third World War owing to an incident known as the 1983 Soviet nuclear false alarm. Click on the top right corner to know more about the incident. One bad move from a nation may trigger the end to an entire human race. We cannot afford the consequences of an out-and-out nuclear war. Once dropped off the air, there is no looking back to death, pain, and suffering it causes. The world needs to take a step forward towards nuclear disarmament. It was the very reason Mr. Yamaguchi stepped in the scene to protect humanity from such monstrous weapons. He has successfully passed the baton in our venture towards nuclear disarmament. From what he and other Hibakushis have shared, it is no doubt we do not want to face similar, if not worse, consequences of nuclear warhead. Disarmament is the only solution to protect we humans from ourselves. Subscribe to our channel and ring the bell icon for more contents like this.